everyone, and welcome to my Capstone video presentation. My name is LaCrisha McNeely, and I am enrolled into the Specialist in Instructional Technology program at Kennesaw State University. I am currently a visual arts teacher at Swainsboro High School, and I have been there for about 6 years. My husband also is a teacher, and we have one daughter, which will be in first grade this year. The title of my capstone project was Mimeotechnology to Actively Engage Students. Some important literature to consider was that Beeland in 2013 found that the goal is to create learning environments where students are actively engaged in the learning process. Student engagement is one of the most important factors that affect teaching and student motivation to learn. When students are apathetic towards learning, a barrier to learning is created. One current method of delivering instruction that may assist with engaging students in the learning process is the use of interactive whiteboards. Through doing the research for this capstone project of mimeotechnology to actively engage students, I saw the need of this project was to be able to help teachers learn how to use their mimeotechnology that was available to them in order for them to engage their students in interactive and authentic learning experiences. At Swainsboro High School, we have a lot of turnover each year. We're very close to a college that is one of the largest actually educational colleges in the state of Georgia. So often they'll hire someone and then within a couple of years they want to go closer to home, and we have a very large teacher turnover. We also have had a lot of new technology that has been introduced into the system, which is great for a small poverty-stricken system like we are. But I noticed that we had a lot of Mimeo strips and technology that were available in the media center that teachers were not using. They had a projector in their board, so they used it as a glorified whiteboard, was pretty much, or a glorified projector, and they weren't really using any of the interactive capabilities that Mimeo had to offer. We do have other technologies such as Apple TVs. We have some of the other type of interactive boards that were installed in some of the classrooms, especially the math classrooms that are big and bulky. But I wanted some of these teachers that just had the projector to be able to see that they were going to be able to utilize some of this technology in their classrooms with very minimal instruction towards that. So the goal of this was, or the purpose was to engage the teachers in teacher-led face-to-face professional development classes during their plan time that would allow them to be able to use those Mimeo boards in their classroom more effectively and, of course, boost student engagement and ultimately raise student achievement. The question for this capstone project was, does the implementation of Mimeo technology actively engage student achievement? So the capstone project plan began as a outline of 4 PLCs, and within those PLCs we needed to address the needs of the teachers. Of course, they need to learn what the technology can do before they take it to the classroom to enhance instruction. And by effectively then observing these teachers and analyzing the data, we would be able to determine if the Mimeo technology in fact did increase student achievement or if there was an adverse effect. This is the project timeline that I proposed in my capstone proposal, but it also was a great tool for me to be able to use because I actually followed this exact timeline. And the great thing about this timeline for teachers, you will notice that December is left out. So therefore, that's always a crazy month. There's only 2 weeks. And you'll notice we finished up in April with me actually following up with the administrative team. So therefore, the craziness of the end of the school year was not an issue. So this timeline worked very, very well for us. So the capstone experience as a whole, this is how it kind of was laid out. We began with a pre-assessment. The first PLC, and I'll explain a little bit later. The first semi-formative assessment. It was just a quick walkthrough, really and truly. Um, Followed up by the second PLC. We had, of course, Christmas holidays in the middle of that, followed up by the third PLC, a second observation, and then the fourth PLC. And you can kind of see the topics that were included in those. And then, of course, the final step was to follow up with the administrative team, the final data per se, the before and the after, to get a holistic picture of this project. So the pre-assessment was a very informal drop-in observation. Did not tell the teachers I was coming, just dropped in to see how many students were actively engaged in the classroom. I would mark there were 24 students in the classroom, 13 of them were engaged, and I would, of course, divide that and turn it into a percentage, and that is what you see right here. The first PLC, we discussed this assessment data and we explained what this data meant. It wasn't the fact that, your students weren't doing what they needed to be doing. This was just the moment in which I walked in. This was the interpretation that I got, and this was indeed your level of usage of Mimeo technology at the same time. So we're trying to get a baseline here. In that PLC, we really focused on basic functions. I had this handout that's right there on the left-hand corner, and we discussed what the bar did, how to calibrate your board, all of the basic functions of Mimeo so that they could actually start getting started using that and implementing it in their classroom. You'll notice that I did kind of have a small checklist per se of things that I was looking at over here on the right hand corner. What classrooms were using Mimeo Studio, and they are also color coded based on the bar graph. What teachers were using the stylus, and you'll notice, of course, that the one teacher that was using both of those had the highest percentages. And then you'll understand right there and below it what other basic Mimeo functions were being used, and you'll see also recorded and color coded was what I observed in the classroom just for that quick, some of them were less than 3-minute walkthroughs just to get a quick impression of what was going on in the classroom. So then that first PLC, that's what we discussed, the pre-assessment data, the basic functions of Mimeo, and I gave them a handout to take with them just in case. We discussed going ahead and implementing this immediately, going ahead and start getting used to your board because you're not going to have anything to troubleshoot if you never use it to begin with. So that led us into our the next step, which was my first observation. That was after the first PLC to kind of give them a kick in the kickstart to see if indeed they were starting to try to implement Mimeo technology into their classroom. So I went into the classrooms to do an observation, and this once again is the next step, and you'll see that many of them did increase. And I think that was solely for the fact that some of them didn't even know that Mimeo technology existed, or some of them were not aware of what that technology did or how to use it. So we reviewed that observation data. Once again, they're all color coordinated so that you can kind of see. And we talked about the interaction capabilities within Mimeo for that actual PLC class. You'll notice that some of the teachers were using interactive matching games, working problems on board by passing the stylus around to students, and then one of the teachers was using Kahoot. So we have varying levels of integration at this point. The third PLC, like I said, this was the break after we came back from Christmas, was screencasting using Mimeo, and the ticket in the door was probably the most important factor of this PLC, and it was what are your personal needs or requests regarding Mimeo technology. So I had them write them down. We had list of game sites, list of ideas or reasons to get the students to come up to the board, to interactively be working with it. So we addressed those individual needs as requested. We didn't have any data to follow up with because it was over that break, but it was just nice to be able to have them have time to reflect and know what they needed help with coming in. So on my part, it was a little bit of I needed to be sure that I was well versed in the technology to be able to kind of troubleshoot anything that they had just off the cuff. So in between that process to the fourth PLC, there was the second and last observation, and there's the observation data for that same excuse me, observation. And you'll notice that there, once again, the percentages increase, which is what you want this to do. Most importantly, you see that what classrooms are using Mimeo Studio And you notice all five of the teachers that I observed were using the studio. Four of the five were actually using the stylus. And you'll notice that the one teacher that was not using the stylus, they had less of percentage of students that were on task or actively engaged in that lesson. But what's more importantly, I think, from PLC number 3 was you'll notice the basic functions of Mimeo that they're using, and they're able to use these interactive capabilities such as GoFormative, Kahoot, Plickers, and interactive assignment. Two of those are in the same, those the green and the red are the same core subject areas, so therefore they were doing the same thing. And then they did a presenter evaluation. The final step of this was to follow up with the administrative team for the final before and after data, and those were all the bar graphs that we collected. I also gave them a collection sheet of the written the how many were actively using the studio, the stylus, and my individual notes as well for them to use for correlations if they needed to. And so, reflecting on this capstone project as a whole, I do truly believe that the use of interactive whiteboards such as Mimeo technology, Apple boards, anything that actively gets those students engaged into the lesson through technology can and will increase student engagement. But in my findings, I see that teachers must have the necessary knowledge to work with the technology for it to be successful. I made a note in one of my observations that the teacher actually had the Mimeo strip in their classroom, and it was sitting on the ledge of the whiteboard, never to be plugged up, and I don't think it had ever been put up on the board. So they had the technology, they just didn't know what it was and what the capabilities were. Through my evaluator or evaluation process, I got this email from one of the participants, which happened to be an ag teacher, and they just wanted to say thank you for offering the classes on the Mimeo boards. This was the particular teacher that they had no training on how to use their boards, and they were trying to figure it out on their own. And then I was able to offer this, and they were very thankful for it. While I'm wrapping up in my final thoughts, teachers who I'll put a quote out there from Turrell in 2012 that was from one of the textbooks that we utilized in the capstone classes. Teachers who use interactive whiteboards effectively increase students' attention, motivation, participation, and collaboration in the classroom. I fully believe that this is the way of the future. I fully believe that technology integration as a whole needs to come a long way. It has come a long way in our district, and now through the implementation of this project, I'm very excited to see what way it's going to go in the future. I hope you've enjoyed a review of all of this, the literature, and I hope that you can definitely see the big picture of how beneficial interactive whiteboards can be in the classroom to engage your students and ultimately, like we all want to do, increase student achievement and narrow that gap. Thanks.